Well, he's back, and I don't think anyone is really that surprised, but today we're going to be talking about Victor Bout, the notorious arm dealer, often referred to as the Merchant of Death. And if you've seen the 2005 film Lord of War starring Nicolas Cage, you're somewhat familiar with Bout's story, but after a decade-long career supplying weapons to conflict zones around the world, Bout was eventually arrested in a sting operation. He was sentenced to 25 years in a U.S. prison and then released in a high-profile prison swap in December 2022 with Brittney Griner, WNBA star. But look, now Bout is back in the spotlight, reportedly involved in a new deal to supply arms to Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi rebels, who the U.S. is actively engaged in with combat operations. This is a move that could shift the dynamics of conflict in the Middle East and increase tensions between the U.S. and Russia. Okay, so real quick, I want to give you guys a background on what this man was all about. He was born in Tajikistan in 1967. This is back when it was still part of the Soviet Union. His career took off after the fall of the Soviet bloc in the early 1990s. He was a former military officer and translator, so Bout was actually highly skilled in multiple languages, including French, English, Arabic, and Portuguese, which allowed him to build an extensive network of contacts across the globe. Using Soviet-made military cargo planes, Bout began transporting weapons to war-torn countries, often in exchange for diamonds and other valuable resources. His clients included rebel groups, warlords, and governments in Africa, South America, and the Middle East. These arms were often used in brutal conflicts such as civil wars in Angola, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. And by the mid-2000s, Bout's networks was one of the largest illicit arms trafficking operations in the world. His ability to provide military-grade weapons to some of the most controversial groups earned him a place on several international most wanted lists, to include the United States. So in 2008, this is when the downfall began, because this is when U.S. authorities, in coordination with Thai law enforcement, carried out a sting operation in Bangkok. DEA agents posed as members of Colombia's FARC guerrillas who were looking to buy weapons, allegedly. Bout agreed to sell them surface-to-air missiles, which he believed would be used to target American soldiers. This led to his arrest and subsequent extradition to the United States. And in 2011, Bout was convicted on charges of conspiring to kill U.S. citizens, providing material support to terror organizations, and attempting to supply weapons to FARC rebels. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, a term that many thought would mark the end of his arms-dealing career. However, even while incarcerated, Bout remained a prominent figure, with Russian officials repeatedly calling for his release. It is also worth noting that Bout's imprisonment didn't stop arms trafficking in Russia or globally. His operations were vast, and his associates continued to trade arms even after his capture. So again, this guy had connections. But this is the part where a lot of people got really upset about this entire situation. December 2022, when Bout's story took a dramatic turn in a highly publicized prisoner swap between the United States and Russia, Victor Bout was exchanged for U.S. basketball star Brittney Griner. Griner had been detained in Russia on a minor drug charge, and after months of negotiations, the Biden administration agreed to trade Bout for her release. The swap was definitely super highly controversial. Many viewed it as a diplomatic victory, as Griner's detainment was widely seen as politically motivated, but there were also concerns that releasing Bout, a man responsible for fueling some of the world's deadliest conflicts, could have dangerous consequences. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan stated that while the U.S. government had weighed the risk, they believed the challenges of Bout's release could be managed. At the time, officials downplayed the possibility that Bout would return to the arms trade, but now, less than 2 years later, there are reports suggesting that Victor Bout is at it once again, involved in illegal arms deals, this time with the Houthi rebels out of Yemen. Okay, so according to recent reports, Bout has resurfaced as a middleman for an arms deal between Moscow and the Houthis, a rebel group fighting in Yemen on an ongoing civil war, actively engaged against Israel and the U.S. Navy and pretty much the entire world. Anyone who has a ship, they're willing to take them out if they do support Israel, but they've also taken out their own. The Houthis are backed by Iran and are known for their attacks on international shipping lanes and missile strikes on Saudi Arabia and Israel. In August 2023, Houthi representatives traveled to Moscow under the pretense of negotiating deals for pesticides and vehicles. But in reality, they were reportedly negotiating the purchase of $10 million worth of small arms from Russia, with Bout acting as the broker. These weapons include AK-47 rifles, an upgrade version of the AK-47, and possibly more advanced equipment like anti-tank missiles. It is important to note that this deal has yet to be completed as I make this video, and there's no clear evidence that it has the full backing of the Kremlin. Still, the development has raised alarms in Washington and other Western capitals, especially given Russia's increasing ties with Iran, the Houthis' main backer. The reemergence of Viktor Bout on the global arms stage comes at a critical time for international relations. Russia is facing growing isolation due to its invasion of Ukraine, and its alignment with countries like Iran and groups like Houthis is becoming more evident. If the Houthis acquire new Russian-made weapons, it could escalate the already volatile situation in Yemen. The Houthis have a history of attacking international shipping in the Red Sea and launching missiles on Saudi Arabia and Israeli targets. Arming them with new weaponry, even small arms, could lead to an increase in these activities and further destabilize the region. Moreover, the situation complicates U.S.-Russia relations. While the Biden administration has been focused on supporting Ukraine, any signs that Russia is supplying arms to groups hostile to U.S. interests in the Middle East will add to growing tensions between the two nations. Washington has already expressed concerns that Moscow might use the Houthis as a proxy to retaliate against the U.S. I mean, if you guys are not following what's going on in the Middle East, the Houthis are doing whatever it takes to try and hit a U.S. ship. That is like one of their end goals, because they can hit oil tankers all day, they can hit cargo ships, but if they can hit a U.S. ship, that's going to be the biggest win in like Houthi history. Now, one thing that's very important to note, there's still no evidence of Russia supplying advanced munitions to the Houthis, as in like long-range missiles or hypersonic missiles to the Houthis. However, we do know that Iran is supplying Houthis directly. But again, coming straight from Russia, there's still not enough evidence for that. Now, here's what's even more crazy. Since this guy's release, Bout hasn't just returned to arms dealing, he's also entered Russian politics. In 2023, Bout won a seat in a local assembly, joining a far-right pro-Kremlin party. He's been an outspoken critic of the U.S. and a strong supporter of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So it obviously makes sense that this guy could care less if he's supporting any sort of enemies against the United States. His media presence and political involvement have only increased speculation about how much influence he holds within the Kremlin and whether his return to arms dealing has the tacit approval of Russian authorities. Look, in Russia, this is not like the United States or other Western allies. When you speak on TV or anything you say, it can be used against you and very, very bad consequences can happen. So the fact that this guy is allowed on national television, he's running in political office, it means a lot, and it means he definitely has a high status among the Russian people. Again, it's just very hard to understand the Russian culture from either an American perspective or really anywhere outside of the Russian perspective and understand how could this guy be such a good man if he was trying to hurt U.S. soldiers? Well, to them, it doesn't matter. He's a hero. He's a patriot. So look, it's clear that Bout's influence extends far beyond his 12 years in U.S. prison. His involvement with the Houthis shows that he remains a key player in international arms trafficking, and his activities could have serious implications for global security, particularly in the Middle East. As always, we'll continue to follow. So that's pretty much what's happening right now. So unfortunately, it looks like the United States miscalculated this guy's ability to have such an outreach and to have such an impact in the ability to trade with African nations, Middle Eastern nations, especially like groups like the Houthis. How do you even get that contact? Well, somehow this guy is able to do it. And unfortunately, while Brittney Griner is slam dunking in the WNBA, this guy is about to be slam dunking some $10 million arms deals with the Houthis that will most likely be used against the United States and definitely against the Saudis.